Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the regular meeting of the City Planning Commission. Today is Monday, February 7th. My name is Alyssa Olson, and I'm the president of the Planning Commission. The city will be recording and posting this meeting to the city's website and YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. This meeting is public and subject to the Minnesota Open Meeting Law. At this time, I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioners Abdi and Marwa will be absent this evening. Commissioner Alper.
Present.
Baxley.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Conley is absent. Ford.
Here.
Koski.
Present.
Meyer.
Present.
And Chair Olson.
Here.
That's 7 members present.
All right, we have a quorum. So next we'll proceed to the agenda, a copy of which was posted for public access to the city's legislative information management system, which is available at lims.minneapolismn.gov. There are also copies on the counter next to the clerk. We'll begin with acceptance of the minutes from January 23rd. Could I have a motion to accept those minutes?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. Our next order of business is to organize the public hearing agenda. I'm going to read through the items on the agenda and state whether each item is slated for consent, continuance with return, or discussion. I'll also briefly explain what those mean. Consent items will be passed without discussion by the board, and we'll be adopting the staff recommendation as well as any conditions stated on those items. So if you agree with staff recommendation, you don't need to say anything. If you disagree with staff recommendation and would like to pull the item off of consent for discussion, you can raise your hand and we'll pull that item. So the following items are on our agenda for this evening. Number 4 is 1011 and 1025 Portland Avenue. This item is being returned, and so we'll do the return action on our consent agenda. Item number 5 is 2837 Oakland Avenue and 2844 Park Avenue. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against staff recommendation on item number 5? Okay, seeing none, we'll put item number 5 on consent. Item number 6 is 1500, 1516, and 1600 Marshall Street Northeast. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against staff recommendation on item number 6? Seeing none, we'll put item number 6 on consent. Item number 7 is 3805 Washington Avenue North, and we will discuss item number 7. Item number 8 is 5401 Chicago Avenue and 811 54th Street East. Staff is recommending this item for consent. Is there anyone here who would like to speak against staff recommendation on item number 8? Okay, we'll put item number 8 on our discussion agenda. Item number 9 is 1823, 1827, 1831, 1835, and 1839 Bryant Avenue North. We will discuss item number 9. So we have items 4, 5, and 6 on consent, and items number 7, 8, and 9 on discussion. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we'll move on to our consent agenda, which is items 4, 5, and 6. I will open the public hearing on the consent agenda. So if there's anyone here who would like to speak on items 4, 5, and 6, you can come to the podium now and state your name and address for the record. All right, seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing for the consent agenda. Commissioners, could I have a motion to adopt staff recommendation for items 4, 5, and 6?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. If you were here for items 4, 5, or 6, those items have been approved. All right, we will move on to our 3 discussion items for the evening. The first item is item number 7, 3805 Washington Avenue North, and staff is Lindsay Silas.
Good evening, Chair Olson and committee. I am here to discuss 3805 Washington Avenue North. I know that there were some questions from commissioners, so I'll just keep the presentation short and give an overview of the project. This site is located between Interstate 94 and the Mississippi River. It's a little over 1.5 acres in size and contains an existing building that was previously used as offices. The applicant is proposing to establish a Day One Recovery Center, which would include multiple types of care for clients undergoing treatment for substance abuse disorders. In the zoning district, the I-2 zoning district, this is considered a hospital use, which requires a conditional use permit. Here's the site in question, and a site plan showing the addition of some landscaping around the surface parking area. The applicant has proposed 42 beds in the facility, and the maximum parking allowed for a hospital 42 beds is 1 space per 2 beds. So the applicant is proposing a total of 21 parking spaces and a loading area for patients. It might be a little hard to see here, but this is the floor plan of the interior showing the beds that are divided into a men's area and women's area, and some additional clinic spaces and nursing station, that sort of thing. And a photo of the exterior of the building. Oh, sorry, that's not supposed to be there. So as far as conditions, just the standard conditions for 1 and 2, staff is recommending that the parking lot be screened with screening that's at least 3 feet in height and 60% opaque, and that the applicant provide a pedestrian connection between the primary building entrance and Dowling Avenue North, and that the number of beds not exceed 42 as proposed by the applicant. With those conditions, staff is recommending approval, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lindsay. Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. This looks like a great project. I asked to discuss it because I wanted to know more about condition number 5, that there should be no more than 42 beds provided in the hospital.
Sure.
What's the reasoning behind that?
So part of this project coming through was that we are discussing some new licensing changes at the state that are basically resulting in this proposed use being considered to be a hospital, and what that use is going to look like when the land use rezoning study is adopted. It's likely that we're going to create a new category that would incorporate these types of substance abuse treatment facilities that would more align with the licensure that is going to be required. And then the reason for limiting the number of beds to the number of beds proposed is just to make it clear that that is what is going to be provided in this facility as proposed, and that any change to the number of beds would have to come back through for another conditional use permit, which is something that would be required anyways. For something that requires a conditional use permit, adding beds would require a conditional use permit anyway. So having that condition is just to make it clear to the commissioner, the applicant, and anyone who may be paying attention to this project that this conditional use permit is just for a total of 42 beds. There is no limit on the number of beds that could be provided in a hospital, but in order to expand the number of beds as a hospital, the applicant would have to come through for another conditional use permit, and then if the use changes with land use rezoning study, that use may or may not be conditional, which then may or may not require coming back through.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Meyer.
Yeah, so I was definitely interested in the hospital classification also for the item that we returned today, and it seems like that's something that we should try to clarify going forward. But for this condition, would we be making it any easier for them? Like, suppose they found, it turns out they can accommodate 43 people instead of 42. If we just didn't add the condition, would they not have to come back?
They would still need to come back if they were expanding the number of beds.
Okay. Well, I guess I find the condition unnecessary and not really like doing anything in the public interest as far as I can tell. It seems like that's the type of thing that should be regulated, but should be regulated by, human services or the health department. So I don't know. I would propose to just not include it if that's okay.
So Lindsay, the ratio of beds to parking spaces is regulated by the zoning code.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that supported by like best practices, or how do we come to that number?
That is a good question. And I do not know the answer.
Yeah, that's fair.
So that would actually be more applicable if they were reducing the number of beds, then they would potentially be exceeding the maximum number of parking. But that's not a condition that we proposed here.
I guess I'm not seeing any other commissioners. I would say that, it's not preventing them from expanding, but they would have to come back. And I don't know, Commissioner Meyer, is that a?
I'm going to go ahead and make a motion. If they do come back, it would be one less thing that they have to ask for, I think. If we, it seems an optional thing to add the condition, and we don't have to. So I would suggest that we don't today.
So if we remove the condition, would we have to make findings for like a variant? I'm trying to understand.
No,
Okay.
there would be no variance required. I don't even know if we, wrote into the findings the fact that we were conditioning that. So, like, if the applicant had proposed 50 beds as part of this project, that's how we would evaluate the project, and then that's how, that's probably the condition that we would have attached. I think in this case, the reason that we thought 42 beds was one, this is, there's some new licensure happening at the state. This is a pretty large building. It's a really large site. We just wanted to kind of have some predictability around the number of beds that were going to be included in this project, because unlike with a community residential facility, there isn't like a maximum number of beds for that type of use.
Okay.
But no, you would not need to make any new findings. It's just a condition of the conditional use permit application and could
Okay.
be removed if the commission desires.
Okay. Baxley and then Meyer.
Are there any, I understand, because it's a conditional use, we usually sort of define what that is. Are there other typologies or things that require stating size, components in a church, for example, or anything like that, that requires specificity like this, or is this unique to a hospital?
So when we have a lot of different buckets of congregate living type uses, some of those do have maximum number of beds. So like we have different categories for community residential facilities based on the number of beds. And those are different uses in the different zoning districts. So whether they're permitted or conditional is dependent on the number of beds that are provided. So that would probably be the closest example. I think in this case, we were similar to the project that was returned on this agenda. We have just been having a lot of conversations around these types of uses and what they're going to be in the future. And so just given that, wanted to give some additional predictability to this project as far as the size that could be expected.
Okay. Go ahead, Meyer.
So it seems to me like it's not an especially consequential condition either way, but I feel like, I'm going to make the motion to, without it, because I'd like to communicate, that if they are able to fit in a few more beds to help a few more people, that's something that we would encourage and not view as like a public nuisance. So I will move item A, or sorry, item 7 with conditional use permit under A, with conditions 1, 2, 3, and 4, but not 5.
All right, is there a second on the motion? Turn on your,
Is there a motion? Sorry.
oh, there you go.
Thank you, somebody.
Magic.
Is there a motion on the floor about adopting what's there before us now, or is that,
Yeah, the motion is to adopt staff recommendation except for to cut condition 5 out.
I'm sorry, I meant to ask, is there a motion before that one on the floor?
I don't
Okay,
believe so.
all right, so that, okay, fine, well, I'll second it then, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I think that the logic that Commissioner Meyer makes total sense. I mean, I mean, there are other constraints, the building size and so forth, and if it turns out that they can fit in 2 more beds and meet the other requirements, then why waste the city's time and our time approving those 2 more beds?
All right, any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll call for a vote.
So just out of curiosity, if they do, because this is linked to parking, and I know we don't have parking requirements on other components of building in the city. So is that interrelated? I'm assuming if they come back, we're gonna have to have a parking discussion anyway, right?
Only if they built fewer.
Fewer.
Yeah. If they had fewer beds,
But if
then they
come back
wouldn't
for
be
more
allowed
beds-
as much parking.
Right. They come back for more beds, they need more parking.
No,
Okay.
no, we never require parking.
Right.
But in this case, from the conditional use, we're defining a relationship of beds to parking, right?
Only
So
one
you're
direction.
taking that off, right?
Lindsay, do you want to comment on that? Thank you.
Commissioner Meyer is correct in that the issue at hand that's discussed in the staff report is the maximum parking. So there is no minimum parking required. The maximum parking for a hospital is 1 space per 2 beds. So if fewer beds were built, then technically there would be fewer parking spaces allowed as part of that application, and those would have to be removed from the parking area to be in compliance. But if more beds were provided, no additional parking would be required, but additional parking could potentially be required without hitting the maximum.
When would new parking be required?
No
okay,
additional
sorry, I just
parking would be
misheard.
required.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will ask the clerk to call the roll.
Commissioner Alper,
Aye.
Commissioner Baxley,
Aye.
Commissioner Campbell,
Abstain.
Commissioner Conley,
Aye.
Commissioner Ford,
All right,
Commissioner Koski,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Chair Olson.
Aye.
That's 7 yeas and 1 abstention.
Excellent, that motion passes. So we'll move on to our next item, which is item number 8, and staff is Hillary DeVork. Seriously.
did we approve item G, the variation, the vacation?
So for item 7, there was only one.
I'm looking at the, oh, I'm sorry, you're right, I'm looking at the wrong one. Thank you.
building in here, so I apologize. I read it, but I think I deleted it, so you might have to bear with me as I jump through what is not my presentation, but just another copy of your staff report, which is not going to help you. So I'm sorry. I don't think this is it. Nope. Okay. Well, we're going to just, not going to quite do what I was going to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. So this is 5401 Chicago Avenue and 811 East 54th Street. The developer is proposing to construct a mixed-use building on the site with 47 dwelling units and approximately 3,800 square feet of ground-level commercial space. It's located at the southeast corner of Chicago Avenue and 54th Street. The site is Zone C1. It's in the airport overlay, which has no impacts on the site because it's shorter than what the airport allows, so there's no mention of it in the report. And it's in the Corridor 4 Built Form District. I'm sorry, but I know that this is, sorry, you guys. I wanted to show you the vacation aspect of the site, and it is not in this one. There is a vacation application as part of the project. There is a north-south alley that will not be impacted. That is where the site will have access from. There is an east-west alley that doglegs out to Chicago, just at the southern edge of the development site. As a result of the right-of-way vacation, there's also a preliminary and final plat in your packets today that has to be done when we are vacating formal right-of-way or public right-of-way. The north half of that vacated alley will accrue to the project site, and the south half of the vacated alley will accrue to the property owner to the south. They have consented to this. They are aware that they are going to be getting land as a result of this development project. So this is the development site. The commercial space is located up at the north end of the building with access directly off of Chicago. There is an additional principal entrance. This is something that had been discussed at Committee of the Whole. They did separate the entrances, so there is a second entrance to the commercial and then your 3 walk-up units along Chicago Avenue. There are 22 parking spaces in the garage, all accessed off of the alley in one level of enclosed parking. So this is that first floor plan. I'm going to jump to the elevations. The elevations on the top, that is your Chicago Avenue elevation. The one on the bottom then is your East 54th Street. And then these elevations, the top one is what faces the alley, and the bottom one is what faces that south property line or where that vacated alley will be. It's a 4-story building with the 1 level of enclosed parking. The building meets all of the site plan review standards in the ordinance. They do not need alternative compliance for any of our requirements in site plan review. Exterior materials of the building include brick and metal panel, fiber cement lap siding, burnished block, and glass. And I'm going to pause here for any questions because I don't know what the rest of my presentation said. So thank you.
Commissioners, any questions for staff? All right, thank you, Hillary.
you.
We will open the public hearing. So is the applicant here, and would they like to speak on this item?
Let's not do it. We're going to just leave it here. Hi.
Hi, my name is Michael Kuntz. I'm the architect on the project and also representing the owner tonight. I'm happy to go over anything that council or city planning wants. If not, I'll wait until other questions come up.
Okay. I'm not seeing any, Commissioner Campbell.
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
In our packets, there was some concern from the residents on the materials that have been used for the building. Could you talk a little bit about the choices that you decided to go with for the facade of the building?
Yeah, I wasn't aware of any comments from the residents. Yeah, so we're using face brick masonry. Let me go to some of the renderings I think will help. Yeah, so this is the Chicago Avenue renderings, and so we're using face brick on the 3 volumes that you know, at a little smaller scale that are going to integrate into the residential homes, the single-family homes and duplexes to the south. And then above that is fiber cement lap siding. Then to the north of that, on the black recess, that's going to be an architectural composite panel with storefront glazing at the corner, which is, you know, hopefully going to be a restaurant, coffee shop, or some kind of office area. And then it'll be some type of a metal panel that will be the white volume. Sure.
Commissioner Koski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wondering too, we got in our emails, and please forgive me here, this is my first planning commission meeting, but there was some concern from constituents as well around construction process and having access to the alleyway during that. So I was wondering if you could speak to any planning around the construction and if that has been decided yet.
Yeah, we had a meeting with the neighbors that are adjacent to the property in December. And that was one area that was discussed, and, you know, obviously the neighborhood was not real happy about it. You know, we are fairly close to the alley on the east side, and so I do believe during construction, when you know, we're not going subgrade, so there's not gonna be a lot of shoring or anything in this project, but there's gonna have to be frost footings that go about 4 feet below kind of where the alley elevation is at that north east part of the site. And so I do think that that alley will have to be closed for a small portion of time, you know, maybe several weeks, up to, you know, a month or something.
And has there been any sorry, Chair, is it- any consideration of other ways that we can still have access to that alleyway? I see there are some constituents that need access. They have electric vehicles, so they, you know, are utilizing this space not just to park their car, but actually to be able to utilize their vehicles. So just curious to know if there's been alternative ways to think about this.
There has been discussions between a few of the property, you know, owners across the alley and ownership. I wasn't privy to all those conversations. What I think the smart thing to do is to keep the vacated alley open until all the work is done. That's going to require any part of the north-south alley to be closed. And then once that work is done, reopen that alley, and then they can proceed with work to the vacated alley. So I don't foresee this really being an issue as far as there's the one house on the north side of that block that I think the access to their alley may be a little bit difficult, and that will have to be worked out, I think.
Commissioner Conley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question. There seems to be a recurring theme from residents around green space. And we are seeing a lot of developments pop up where it is concrete from corner to corner, from every single inch of the design space is utilized for the building. So what was the thinking around that? Are there any plans? I'm looking at the front right now. There could be some boulevard and some flowers or something, but there seems to be just this recurring theme that there is no green space at this very large plot of land, and it could certainly use it.
This is a preliminary rendering that's not showing any of the landscaping. I've got the current ones in my hand, which I'm happy to show you, where we are showing a little bit more greenery and trees and vegetation. Yeah, obviously the one that's not showing any vegetation is pretty stark. How do I get up there?
You can put it on that, I think, right?
Oh, the project, or the, what do you call this?
The overhead projector.
Yeah.
If you want to draw on it, you need one of those clear things on top.
Yeah, that's right. There you go.
We've added some trees to the boulevard, both along Chicago and 54th Street. We are trying to landscape as much as we can against the building. We are pretty tight with the setback against the building, and you know, this site, the zoning for this site is commercial as the underlying zoning, and so we are allowed to be 100%. And so it's, you know, we're trying to be efficient, obviously, with the site. I will say that the vacated alley is going to be mostly green space. So that will be 14 feet of space that goes from, you know, which was bituminous or hardscape to it's going to be greenery now. So there is something there.
Commissioner Alper?
Thank you. I'm excited to see the plan for these trees, and so I'm glad you brought this forward. And I just hoping you're working with forestry staff within the Minneapolis Park Board, obviously. But I also want to ask what your plan is for maintaining these trees as the property owner. Do you have watering plans nearby? A hose?
Yeah, I think there's going to have to be
out there,
irrigation.
or irrigation.
You know, in the areas that are, you know, part of the property owner's scope. I think the trees that you're seeing out here, I think that's going to be part of the city's realm. Correct me if I'm wrong, Hillary. But, yeah, there will have to be irrigation, obviously, to sustain the plant life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just would say it, I mean, it's, this park board and the city can only do so much with maintaining new trees, and we've seen that it's really important that homeowners that are nearby take care of the boulevard trees. And so, you know, especially since this is serving, correct me if I'm wrong, 47 units, you know, these people, like, I feel like it's easy to say, oh, well, somebody else will water the trees, you know? So I really hope you can put that into the plans with the property manager.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions, thank you. Our public hearing is open, so if there are any other residents here who would like to speak on this item, you can come up to the podium now and state your name and address for the record and proceed with your comments.
You can go. I'll go after you. We got a line.
Hi, we're a pair. I appreciate that you brought it up. It sounds like you've read some of our concerns, and
Could you
just
state,
so we,
sorry, could you state your name and address for the record, or name and neighborhood
Sure.
is fine?
my name is Ty Mendenhall. It's my wife.
Qingling Mendenhall.
Thank you.
We'd like to read from our email just to make sure that we don't miss anything. But you want to take it away first?
Okay. Oh, here. Okay. So, we would like to take the following items concerned into your considerations. So first is building color. We appreciate that this building will not be painted in a very dark color. However, our hope is that a more warm colors, that's a gray that is currently planned that could be used. If the building could at least roughly match the light tan or at off-white stucco colors of most the homes around us, we will appreciate this very much. The second one is green space. This building is currently planned to use almost every square feet of the space within its property lines. This will contribute greatly to its very imposing out-of-place and warehouse-like presence in the neighborhood, unlike anything nearby, and undoubtedly hurt the curb appeal and the property values of all nearby homeowners. Could you please use the perimeter of the property to have some green space instead? We ask this for obvious aesthetic reasons for all, and for psychological sense of breathing room for the building's immediate neighbors.
We just had a couple of other concerns. In regard to parking, the proposed property will have roughly twice as many units as it does parking spaces. And we're aware of the developer's narrative that most of the residents will not have cars. We also don't believe that. We worry about increasing parking congestion in our neighborhood streets, which are already pretty tight now. And of course, that's during all seasons. And then, you know, we'll vouch, especially during the times of snow emergencies, when everybody's got to move over to one side already, and it is, I'm not going to lie, crazy. So is there any way to include more parking, to build a bigger parking facility in this building, or less units in exchange for less, I mean, that way there'll be less cars? That we'd really appreciate it if you could think about that. we're the house that's on the corner with the EVs. And our understanding is that a whole month or more of problems accessing our garage is going to be tough. And I appreciate sentiments about being able to work with us. But these cars are too low to the ground to hop curbs and to get into our garage. And for a whole month, oh my goodness, I mean, we would appreciate some other kind of system to be able to work that out. I don't have the impression that we have agency on whether or not this will happen, but if we could at least be able to charge our cars during the process, we'd appreciate it. And then finally, and I'll just read this, loss of property use and property value. Lang and I aren't going to be able to watch another sunset from our backyard ever again. And, we did a ton of work in our backyards with our deck and our landscaping to do that a couple of years back. And that's just hard. That's sad. It sucks. And, and on top of that, we're aware that there's going to be layers of units now with windows looking down right into our backyard, so there goes our backyard use, our backyard space, our everything about our backyard and the sunsets, and there goes our property, our privacy, so we don't have any more backyard really forever now. And I know that and I know I'm not speaking just for me, but all told, the perceived attractiveness or now unattractiveness and thereby values of our home is unquestionably and permanently going to be hurt in terms of our property value and just the niceness and the wonderfulness of our home that's no longer going to be that way. Okay? And and again, I know we don't have a whole lot of agency to change this. I think the writing's on the wall, but if you all could do anything about our concerns and our concerns of our neighbors here, boy, we'd appreciate it, just so the hit doesn't feel as hard of a hit as it's feeling right now.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this item?
Hi, my name is Bryn, and I live just a stone's throw away. I'm at 5429 Chicago. So thank you for taking the time and speaking with us today. I just had a couple of questions. I don't know if this is the right forum to do that, but as it applies to first of all, the alley being closed. So I know we heard that that would be about a month or so. Would that be the entire alley or part of a section? Can you answer that?
This isn't really a question and answer, but if you say what you're wondering, we might be able to address it.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess that would be a note of concern then, tying that more to the thread of what we're doing here. That's a note of concern that they mentioned. Another one that was mentioned, but I will reiterate, is obviously the parking. It's really tight right now, especially with the snow emergencies. So, when folks are having friends over and Friday, Saturday nights, it gets really, really, really busy out there. So that would be something that I would just appreciate you folks consider, is the amount of parking spaces that are being offered right now, if that could be increased. And then the other point of concern also is, where are these folks when they're moving in and moving out? It's going to be turnover fairly consistently. Where are the moving trucks going? Like, where are they parking their car and bringing boxes in and out? How is that going to impact our lives? So those are the 3 points of concern that I wanted to talk about today. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this item?
Hi, I am Greg Barnett. I am the immediate south neighbor of the new development. So I'll have quite an imposing new feature to look out my living room window, dining room window, kitchen window, any window I look out at. And I'm going to echo some of the similar complaints. Concerns. It does seem like landscaping and perhaps lighting is not quite done yet. There'll be more to come later on that. I would be really interested in following up, how much landscaping or little, because the former building had 6 or 7 trees and a lot of green space, which will be gone now. I don't know how many lights or what type of lighting there will be, when it will be on, how much glare might be coming in my windows or not. And to the point too, it's big, it's black, it's a study in gray tones and I don't see any warmth to the building. It's not that inviting. There's nothing else of its size and scope that it could be a counterpoint with if it was all study in black and white and tones of gray like it seems to be. There's nothing else to balance out with, and a quick look for 4 blocks up and down Chicago Avenue, I'm not seeing much of anything that looks like there's a lot of gray. Maybe 10% of the houses I saw had something of gray in it to the immediate neighborhood. There's a lot of stucco, a lot of lighter brick, a lot of medium brick, 1 or 2 red bricks, 1 or 2 light white bricks, but not a lot of anything that dark and noticeable. And I think I know Molly Renner had written to you. I think she had said that. I echo her concerns that it's looking for something lighter and brighter if we could, so it won't be quite so imposingly dark. I mean, it's going to be dramatic, I'm sure, but I'm not sure I want to look out at just all this darkness for the entire time now. But we will be getting half the alley. Then that will be a greatly missed neighborhood asset. That alley, that little short east-west half alley does get a lot of use by the entire block, especially the north half of the block. But I would like to have something not quite so dark. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? You can come forward.
Hi, my name's Paul Wojcik, and the size of this building is going to affect the livability in the neighborhood in a major way for the life of the building. Part of the building is a restaurant, and the other part apartments, and that's going to generate a lot more parking, especially moving in and moving out. And looking on that print, it appears that that's going to be taking place in the alley, that overhead door. That's going to block the alley regularly and for prolonged periods of time, requiring the residents to back down the alley. And that doesn't seem like a very good design. I'd suggest I'd like to know what the plan is for moving and moving out with that many units, what the plan was for that plus deliveries to the restaurant, service vehicles, and visitors to the apartment. But a major deal is that moving in and moving out and blocking the alley with moving vans for prolonged periods of time. That just isn't going to work. They've got to come up with a better design, a loading zone, leaving that alley where it is, not vacating the alley. That would be an option. It's going to generate a lot more parking on Chicago Avenue. I'd like to know what the city's plan is for managing that, so the residents can park in front of their own house. There are duplexes on both sides of Chicago Avenue on the 5400 block. There's people that need to park there, and the developer has included a token amount of spaces, but he's pushing it off on the neighborhood. I really think that loading zone needs to be considered and included. You can't have that for the life of the building there. That just isn't going to work. The other thing I wanted to know is If that soil has been tested, that's a site of a former service station there. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Mike Raring. I live at 5404 Elliott Avenue. Oh, you're going to speak. This is my son, Leo. My wife, Lindsay Dickinson, is also there. Yeah, we echo similar sentiments to the rest of the neighborhood here, where green space is of vital importance to us. People that live in this residence, we want to make sure that they have a nice, warm, welcoming place to live. You know, the building color, we would like it to blend in with the neighborhood as best as it can. Environmental remediation came up. You want to talk about the shadows?
Wait,
Yeah, it's okay.
which one?
So we're parallel or perpendicular to the alley, and we have some concerns just about shadows in our backyard, in our building. We do have some solar light tubes in our house right now, and those may not get a lot of sun based on the current plan.
Can I do it?
Sure. Yeah.
This is a long way before we moved in, and it currently works well in part because we have had the parking space area for the dental lab to pull out into. The additional LA traffic is from adding the building and parking and vacating the EU new one.
It's okay, good job. So referring to the parking behind the building, and it will be more difficult for us to access our garage. Our other request is just the business that does come into the neighborhood. Hopefully it's a business that is respectful of the neighbors and doesn't create a lot of excess noise, and it's something that, you know, would be a place that the neighbors would welcome, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think most of our concerns have been addressed. Wanted to thank you for the time tonight, and appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? All right, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, any discussion? Commissioner Ford?
I have one question for the developer, and that has to do with the, thank you, the concern about parking for the commercial space. And the alley, am I correct in thinking that the spaces underground in the building are not for commercial customers, that residents only?
Correct. I think that a few of those spaces will be made available for people who work at that space. But yeah, for the public that's coming into that space, none of those parking stalls are provided for, you know, customers, if you will. Just to touch on the moving in, moving out situation, I totally agree. First off is we've got a relatively gracious garage door and ceiling height in the interior garage, and so I think any vehicle that can come in and move in, that's where the elevator is, so that would only make sense. So I think most of the smaller or box truck or moving van type vehicles will be able to make that. Anything that's larger in size, I think that ownership is going to have to make sure that everybody parks on Chicago and, you know, keeps everything out of the alley. I don't know why people would be parking in the alley to move in. It's uphill from there. I think it would be really difficult. So I don't think that's going to be a problem, but I think that we need to stress that it isn't a problem.
Well, Madam President, I live in an apartment building, and that last answer kind of confuses me. I can certainly see why, I mean, when you refer to the elevator, is that an elevator from the building lobby or from the parking area?
Well, it's serving both. So the parking area kind of walks into a combined lobby for the residences. That is where the elevator will be located, and that's where people will use to move in.
I can imagine concern, and it's concern about trucks blocking the alley. I guess that's a concern to me. I'm not sure what's done about that. In my building, people do not unload into the front lobby of the building. So I guess we'll see. I don't know.
Well, I think in this case, any oversized vehicles will have to unload in Chicago and bring their goods, you know, through
Or
the
park in the alley and block the alley.
Hopefully not.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I think I'm done.
Okay.
One last question. So, I mean, is there any space on the alley side of the building where a truck could park and unload without blocking the alley?
Not currently. You know, maybe a portion of this vacated alley could be reserved for some kind of a loading zone for people that move in. Again, you're lower than where the lobby is there elevationally. So to have to unload there and then wheel all your stuff up in, I don't think that's going to be very advantageous. I think people would rather do it from Chicago.
Where is the parking bus stop? Is there a bus stop near you? I mean, it's the east side of the street.
I think Rachel can do it. Right.
There is a bus stop right in front of the development on Chicago Avenue. The alley is not wide enough that would allow loading, into and out of, as the building is up to and within just a few feet of that rear property line. So service vehicles, XL, trash, recycling, all of those vehicles, as they do now, can come and go down the alley. They can park up to 30 minutes per their agreements with the city for work. But loading could not stop vehicles in there. And so residents would have to either come into the parking area off of the alley to unload, or they would have to use Chicago. Now, there is a bus stop, a D-line bus stop in front of the building. If we get our express routes, we'll also have buses back on 54th, but they're not there yet. So that is the reality of the site. So and there are bike lanes also on 54. So loading options would be in the garage if the vehicle fits, or on Chicago Avenue.
Am I correct, so that there's a bus no parking zone by the lobby?
Yes, there is a no parking zone in front of the lobby. The minimum requirement for a loading is 100 units. This is 47, so there is no requirement. In the 3,800 square feet, the minimum for commercial is 20,000. So none of the uses, neither of the two uses meet the minimum threshold for requiring a loading space. So I just want to be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Commissioner Conley? Oh, that was your question. Okay. Commissioner Alper?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, I'm not seeing the D-line stop at 54th. It's I see it at 56th. So it's the 5 and the 14. Yep.
All right, let's see. Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. Can you show page 33 from the staff report? It shows the different amenities that are nearby.
Yeah, hold on. Yes, I can. Sorry. I had this presentation, I just had it named differently, so I'm so sorry. Okay, I think you're looking for
Yeah, it was from the applicant.
this.
There we go. Yeah, I want to thank the applicant for including that. I think that's always helpful to include something like that. And I think it's just important to display that for the context of why this place has the zoning that it does, because it's adjacent to a lot of different amenities, including a grocery store and a school and restaurants and churches. and Chicago Avenue is a goods and service corridor. And one of the main goals of the city, in order to meet our climate obligations, is to encourage more transit-oriented development. And this is actually, pretty modest zoning for a place with transit lines nearby. And in a lot of other places in the city, this would allow for 6 stories, where this is only corridor 4. So I just wanted to speak to that background and say that, I appreciate the commenters coming today and speaking their concerns, but the idea that we should try to reduce the number of units and increase the amount of parking goes in the opposite direction of what the city is trying to do with our climate goals, which is to have more people and fewer cars in the city. And this is the type of location where we've been encouraging that transit-oriented development. So that's all context of why it has the zoning that it does. They're not asking for a lot from the commission today that they don't already have by right. They're not asking for any variances. There is a site plan review. There is the plat. There is the vacation. So if there was a case, directly against that alley or that platting, or certain things within the site plan review, those are things that we could consider. But most of the project is allowable by right. So with that, I'll go ahead and put a motion on the floor. I would move to approve item 8 with items A, B, and C with the stated conditions consistent with staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Meyer. Before I go on, does anyone remember if I closed the public hearing?
You did.
I did. Okay, thanks. Okay, so Commissioner Meyer has made a motion.
Second.
And I'll get to you. Okay, and we have a second. Okay, Commissioner Campbell.
I just wanted to start and first of all say to the young man who came here today, we don't often get young voices, and the more we get, the better. So thanks so much for coming out here today. The second thing I wanted to say is that we're often put in a position where we are empathetic to the cause of the people who have come and shared their opinion, having lived next to these large buildings. But in a lot of cases, we are unable to incorporate them into decision making. This is a refrain that this body says regularly, but parking is the perfect example of that. We're not allowed to review site plans or anything in the lens of parking, even though I know that that's a frequent frustration for many people who are living next to new large development buildings. I encourage the developer to continue to work closely with the neighbors and the residents. I think that Hillary did a good job of summarizing sort of the code and how it does not carve out exceptions for the types of situations that we talked about, but that's not necessarily enough in most cases. And so to the extent that you can work with the residents in the neighborhood to limit the types of inconveniences that the couple here said about their electric cars and that kind of thing, I think the better off we are. Ultimately, I'm going to vote to approve this primarily due to what Commissioner Meyer said, which is that I think this falls directly into the vision of what we're trying to accomplish as a city when it comes to climate action, Minneapolis 2040, and the like. Thanks.
Commissioner Koski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to say thank you to the residents that showed up here tonight to speak about their concerns. I heard, many concerns. I heard a few positives too, and for all those that made comments here tonight or sent in comments too. I also heard the developers say that they've had some community conversations, so I will be in approving this tonight and then continuing to ask that everyone stay in connection with one another and continue these conversations. I heard things around lighting, color, green space, and the construction time. Commissioner Campbell described the electric vehicle situation in the back. So again, I will be approving this, but just want to make sure that I encourage everyone to continue these conversations.
Commissioner Conley.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And I'm just going to echo some of that as well. Thank you all for coming to speak on this project. And just to add, I lived in that purple blob to the south of the project for quite a while. And that was a dentist office, I believe, right there on the corner. So it's my old neighborhood. Jim's is great. So is Huey's. But I do think that the residents bring up a good point. I'm looking forward to continued engagement with neighbors because I really think that that's valuable to be good neighbors. And I think that there's something to be said about the color even. I mean, it's minor, but there's a lot of new developments going up because both the county, the city, we're all valuing more development, more housing for more people, less vehicles, as Commissioner Meyer has said as well. But a lot of the construction that's going up is kind of this dark steel gray color that, I don't know if that's an architectural trend right now, but I'm seeing it all over with new development. So perhaps blending in a little bit with the homes in this area isn't too far-fetched of an idea. So just something to think about as, community conversations continue to happen. So thank you.
All right. I think those are all old questions.
Yep.
Okay. I'm not seeing any more. So the motion on the table is to adopt staff recommendation, and I will ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper,
Aye.
Commissioner Baxley,
Aye.
Commissioner Campbell,
Aye.
Commissioner Conley,
Aye.
Commissioner Ford,
All right?
Commissioner Koski,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Chair Olson.
Aye.
That's 8 yeas.
All right, that motion passes. Our next item this evening is item number 9, and staff is Hillary Dvorak.
I swear. Okay. I think we're all right. Last item on the agenda, which is not unfamiliar to some of you on the commission. We do have a lot of new commissioner members, and I should say welcome to Commissioner Koski. I should have done that at the very beginning of our meeting, so I apologize, but you all have a new commissioner sitting with you tonight, so I apologize. And Commissioner Meyer, yes, I'm sorry. Old but new again. So so we have 2 new bodies up there on the dais this evening. So welcome to everybody. Now I will start on this last item. So sorry, this is item number 9, 1823 to 1839 Bryant Avenue North. This is a residential development, 5 stories, 79 units, 53 enclosed parking spaces. Several applications before you. I will say that prior to this application, last fall, you guys approved and the Met Council approved a comp plan amendment to move the built form guidance of this site from interior 3 to corridor 6 to allow a building up to 6 stories at a higher density. So I just wanted to remind you of where we've been on this site, and now I will get you to where we are. 3 rezoning applications are required this evening. The first is to rezone 1839 Bryant from R4 to R5. The second rezoning is to rezone the other 4 properties, 1823 to 35 Bryant from R2B to R5. We are recommending approval of both of those rezonings. The comprehensive plan supports the upzoning of these properties to allow for higher density. One major point of the comp plan amendment that was approved last fall is that light rail is coming to Broadway instead of Olson, a major policy change for the city. And so we are looking at having higher densities along Broadway and in the immediate area. The next rezoning follows suit to the comp plan amendment. They did the comp plan amendment first. Now they are rezoning the built form guidance, or that overlay, from interior 3 to corridor 6. We are recommending approval of that, which should not be a surprise. That is what they moved the comp plan guidance for. Then there are 4 variances. There is a variance to increase the maximum lot coverage from 70 to 79.4%. Yard variances, one along Bryant for the front yard, one on the north interior side yard, and then one on the rear yard. Staff is not recommending approval of any of those variances. We could not find practical difficulty, but we can make the second and third findings for all 4 variances, and I will go through those in a little bit more detail in a minute. Site plan review for a new 5-story 79-unit building, and then there is an admin FAR increase application to bring the FAR of the building up from 3 to 3.65. So again, it's 79 units, 53 enclosed parking spaces. For the floor area ratio premiums that they applied for, they get the 0.65% points for enclosed parking. So they do get to take advantage of that higher FAR, which is the 3.65. They did need 4 points worth of travel demand management strategies. They are doing public realm enhancements along Bryant Avenue North, excuse me. This is a senior 62-plus building. We talked and met with Public Works to get through the strategy points. They are going to be increasing, not sidewalk width, because that is already at the right width, but they are going to be doing enhanced landscaping, and there are benches that they're going to put on each side of the entry into the building for those coming and going, and also waiting for rides or whatnot as they're leaving the site. And then they will also be unbundling and pricing of parking. So the 3 points for the public realm and the 1 point for the unbundling of pricing and parking gets them to the 4 points. Public Works and CPED have approved the TDMP. I'm not going to go through the rezoning findings. I'm going to honestly just concentrate on the variances. We are recommending denial of the site plan review, but for the denial of the variance applications, we would have approved site plan review. It is meeting all but one requirement in site plan review, which is a blank wall on the south elevation of the building. The rear 37 feet, and I'm sorry, I went to the wrong one. This portion of the building is blank. There's an XL transformer sitting in front of it. XL does not allow windows. They could do something to change it, but there will be landscaping around the XL box, and so between the XL box itself and the landscaping, you won't necessarily see the blank wall. But because of the variances, we had to recommend denial of the site plan because it would have been a very different building. So I'm going to jump to the variances, and let's concentrate on those. Again, we could not make any of the first findings for the 4 variances. The first one is the lot coverage. The maximum footprint that would be allowed is 24,000 and some change. The building is 27,000 and some change, so there is about 3,000 square feet more of footprint. And we could not find practical difficulty to support the variance. The intent of max lot coverage and maximum impervious surface are established to combat the urban heat island effect, promote adequate space for landscaping, reinforce existing or planned development patterns, and to reduce stormwater runoff. So lot coverage is how much of the building is covered with or how much of the site is covered by a building. Your total impervious is building footprint plus everything else that doesn't let water through it. So your sidewalks, driveways, ground level patios, things like that. The maximum impervious is 85. So maximum lot coverage is 70, maximum impervious is 85. They are not exceeding the maximum impervious of 85%. They will have more than the minimum amount of required landscaping on the site. They will have 2 stormwater infiltration areas. They are working with Public Works on additional stormwater improvements to the site, all of that to help control runoff. We don't feel that increasing lot coverage would be detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of the area. But again, because we could not find practical difficulty, we are recommending denial. The next variance then is your front yard setback along Bryant Avenue North. Hold on one second, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. The house to the south, and I believe it's the low-density residential structure to the south has a porch that is 30 feet from the front property line that establishes the front yard setback along the block. So the required front yard setback for this entire property from south to north is the 30 feet. This section of the building is notched out to 27. The rest of the building is up at between 0 and I think 3 feet or so. I'm sorry, some of the specific numbers maybe have jumped out of my head since I reviewed and wrote the report. Again, we couldn't find practical difficulty. However, the building massing has been pushed to the north where you have commercial buildings up on Broadway. The notch here would be something similar that would be required had this site been zoned commercial where we wouldn't have lot coverage or setback requirements. However, it is zoned residential. But they are meeting this front yard notch, if you will, to give some of that open space to that front property line. I will note, regardless of this setback, the building up here at the corner of Bryant and Broadway is located up to the front property line along Bryant. And then there is a large multifamily housing development going up across the street. That building is set between 0 and 11 feet from Bryant. So you will have matching similar setbacks, if you will, if you're moving south along Bryant. Walking down this street towards, or excuse me, if you're heading from north to south. So there are, sorry, I'm getting lost in my thoughts here. So there is, sorry. So again, we couldn't find practical difficulty, but we do feel that it is characteristic of the area to build to the setbacks that they're proposing. The last two setbacks in that they have is to reduce that north interior side yard setback from 11 down to 8.5 feet. The portion of the building that's 8.5 feet is 16 feet in width. It is this little notch at the corner of the building there. The rest of the building meets the required setback. This site is separated from the commercial properties to the north by a 10-foot wide public alley. The portion of the building, again, that is located less than 11 feet is only 16 feet in length. And the building would be located between 18.5 and 21 feet from those buildings on the north side of the alley. The last variance that's needed is along the rear property line, along the alley here. Across the alley, you guys approved, or excuse me, not you guys, the Planning Commission approved land use applications to allow a surface parking lot on the other side of the alley from this site for the first 3 lots. So most of this site will be adjacent to a surface parking lot for the 927 West Broadway building that was being rehabbed by the same development team many years ago. The building will be between 6 and 23 feet from the rear property line. The portion of the building that is less than the 9 feet is approximately 138 feet in length. And the building that is more than 9 feet is 58. So most of the building, a lot of the building is pulled back more than 9 feet. It's a fraction of the building, the entire building wall, if you will, that is located within that 6 feet. Again, this side of the alley is separated from the properties to the east by a 20-foot wide public alley. So the north-south alley on the block, again, is 20 feet. The east-west alley is 10, and this site has frontage on both the east-west alley here and the north-south alley here. Again, the portion of the building that is located less than the 9 feet would be located 26 feet from the properties located on the east side of the alley. Of the 5 properties located on the east side of the alley, the northern 2 properties have been approved for the surface parking lot with a solar canopy on it to be constructed. The next property to the south is vacant. It's also owned by the city of Minneapolis, and I believe it is part of some of the projects that are happening on Broadway to spur the redevelopment of those buildings. And then the southern 2 properties contain single-family dwellings with detached garages located along the alley. So overall, the building would be located between 26 and 43 feet from the properties located on the east side. For all of that, again, it's lack of practical difficulty that we found, but we could make the other 2 findings for the 4 variances. I will stop. I'm very thirsty, and I will stand for questions, unless you have anything else.
Okay. I I have some questions. So when it says like 8.5 and 12 feet, that just means that the building is notched and there's two, okay.
Yes.
And on the east side, front yard, so the notch on the south end lines up with the house to the south.
It does not. It
Oh,
is
it doesn't.
3 feet closer to Bryant,
Oh.
to that property line than the house.
Okay.
So this is 30 feet, this is 27. But there is a 13-foot difference from this not difference, there's a 13-foot setback of the building from this south property line. And then this house is not directly on it, and I would have to
Okay.
get something to see what that number might be for how far the building is south of the property line.
So when it's a corner lot, we don't do the string test? You know what I'm talking about, where it's like the front corner of one?
This is similar to trolley line condos. Good question, Commissioner Olson. Because it's a commercial property, we don't include that.
Okay, okay. Commissioner Meyer?
You touched on the question I was going to ask, but I was just going to ask you to explain why there is such a difference between this project and the last project that we approved, where the lot coverage was 89% and the impervious surface was 96%, and people brought up valid concerns about the landscaping for that. And so, is it correct that it's just because this one is not commercial and that one was?
That is correct.
Okay, so it seems like the city was receptive to making a change based on the blue line going that route instead. Is there a reason that commercial rezoning wasn't considered as part of that?
We did have two scenarios laid out at the beginning of the process. I think at the time, and this is going back to, I guess it was last summer of 22, excuse me. We weren't sure of the alignment on the BRT, or not the BRT, but on the light rail. If it was Broadway, we had, I think, 99% assurance that it was here. But to not bring commercial zoning further into the block, we felt that it was most appropriate to maintain a residential-based zoning than to change the future land use to like a commercial mixed use or residential mixed use type of district. And so that is why the underlying properties are still zoned residential.
Thank you.
Commissioner Koski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to throw out the new card here because everyone can refer to old projects and whatnot, but I do not have that liberty. So please help me, and as I learn here with all of you, so I appreciate this. So could you help me understand, I see that you've denied this. I've also heard you say, out of not having a practical reason. Is that correct?
A practical difficulty, yep.
Correct, okay. Can you help me understand then, if this does continue to deny, like what would this do for this specific development? Like what would all of these, if they would have to, go down to the specific feet that we need? I mean, are we changing the amount of parking that are, or amount of units? Like, can you, what does this do?
This is not the best exercise, but if you just lopped off the building at this point, took off all of the amenity spaces, front lobby, elevator, staircase access points up, that would, you'd have to squeeze a few more feet. So we wouldn't want just a parking garage on the first floor. So you're gonna lose ground floor parking, you're gonna lose units up above, because once you shrink in, you have to shrink the upper floors of the building as well. So it would be a complete redesign of the site at this point, is where, if you adopted staff recommendations, approving rezonings but denying everything else, it would be a different building altogether.
Thank you, and I appreciate you bringing up the visuals, because I am a visual learner, so that's great. Thank you.
Hillary, so I'm just trying to think of what a practical difficulty could be, but the houses to the south, Those are just single-family residential, and their setbacks are like 30 feet or something like that.
I believe there are two or three low-density residential structures to the south of the site, and then there is a multifamily
Okay.
at the southern corner of the property.
So the 30 feet is not significantly more than the rest of the houses on the block.
I would have to pull it up in Google and kind of eyeball that to confirm setbacks.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Baxley?
Yeah, I think the notch is about, it's taken back about the width of a property too, correct? So, I mean, and we've approved those gestures before. I'm trying to think about the practical difficulty, because the site, there's an interesting, it looks like it's got 90-degree corners all the way up, but it doesn't. And I think that is causing these sort of weird sort of slices and variances around. So, if you're in New York, you've got to follow setbacks, you got to cut in at airspace, and so you end up with these buildings that are shaped by sort of zoning and airspace. And I think in this case, the building has been rationalized. They picked kind of a intermediate spot relative to the property lines and built it rectilinearly as opposed to just shaving. So I think is there a practical difficulty around that? It's certainly simpler. There's probably a chance you're going to save materials. One could probably develop a narrative around that relationship in a way that made some sense. But I feel like what's been going on in this district, and we talked about this when you came before, there's a pattern here. This recognizes that pattern, and as it transitions into single family, which will transition also at some point, the validity of this what we're giving up, like they said, they just couldn't find practical of it. Everything else makes some sense. So I feel like this is an appropriate project to sort of recognize in that way, and the practical difficulties are in the sort of geometries of the site and the property lines relative to those.
Yeah, okay. Conley and Campbell.
Thank you. And so building off of that, I think you mentioned that even with these denials, sort of the plan itself already fits in to this area anyway. Can you like build off of what you said? It's kind of like you mentioned that it fits in with the traditional feel of this area. So talk to me a little bit about that, because it seems like it fits, but there's little pieces that, practical difficulty. So I'm
Sure.
trying to rectify that in my head right now.
Chair Olson, Commissioner Conley. For those of you who have not been on the Planning Commission for some time, the Satori development by Jet Development Group has been discussed with the Planning Commission for, I want to say almost 10 years, maybe 8 years, maybe 2016 might have been the first time we came to Planning Commission, and Tim had a grand vision along Broadway Avenue of 3 entire blocks, redeveloping 3 blocks. There were skyways, it was tall development. This was before 2040, and I think everyone was like, oh my goodness, that's a lot of new development. It looked all like what you're seeing on the left side of your screen. This is Satori Boutique. This is what's under construction right now at the corner of Bryant and Broadway. This got approved back in 2020, before 2040 was approved. You can see on the zoning map that was here, and I apologize, I just don't understand all of our technology in this room. You can see here that back in it was approved. We rezoned that entire site to C1. We had the policy guidance, we had a different comp plan, we had a different zoning code though, so you have to also remember things have completely changed, but we're trying to still move everything forward. So going back to this picture, this project right here, this 6-story, it's 119 units, I think it is, 112, 119 ground floor commercial along Broadway, walk-up units along Bryant, which you can kind of see here. This is that corner of the building. When we were talking about the front yard setback here, you can see that the corner of this building is up to the corner of Bryant, just like this existing building is. Here's the project that you're talking about, that we are talking about this evening back here. So you can see how they play off of one another. This was discussed at Committee of the Whole back in November when we brought the project before you for that. And so it is playing off this relationship. And then this infill building, this 4-story building, and this is the Satori Lofts project that the Planning Commission approved, I think, back in 20. That was a 2020 project. Sorry, that's my point of reference. When did you go to Planning Commission? Was it virtual or not? This was approved back in 2020. So this is the second phase of the Satori development along West Broadway. This is the third phase that is being proposed. And so collectively, we've been talking about this as kind of a new area within this area of Broadway, if you will, bringing density at affordable and market rate units. And this development before you tonight is 62 units geared towards those 62 and over, excuse me. So it's a senior focused development. So I would say that that is kind of how we've been looking at this. We just, in this one, today before you have the wrong, we don't have the right base zoning that gets us out of these requirements. But when we were here for Committee of the Whole, and even coming back to 2016, it's always been, we want to do all of this together to change, to have a real impact in this area of the city. And so that is what's before you. I kind of glossed right over these images at the beginning of the presentation, so I apologize. But this is the back of that building. It's a lot of liberty for green space around the parking lot, but this is going to be a surface parking lot in the foreground. This is the back, and you can see here that the Satori Boutique, this one, is at the terminus of that alley. And so when you come down, these are the pictures of what's coming down. So this is that Satori Boutique that's under construction. So it was 3 more lots down. There were many lots facing Broadway. An alley got vacated here, and then all of this got rezoned. We went from 1 commercial zoning and residential to all C1 zoning on this site across the street. Are you all sleeping? Okay.
Yeah, not just, I do remember talking about this at Committee of the Whole, and I think, the project's potential is in its sort of district creation. I would encourage the development team to, I know you've got the minimum number of plantings along Bryant, but that infrastructure, the sort of canopy along either side of Bryant needs to be robust. And so make sure they're well taken care of, put as many plants as you can in there. And I see the site plan of the notched out corner. I see the sad little rendering of that with just a little fence and nothing in there yet. So that corner is really important. And so I think even providing access outside to that from the exercise room, you might consider that as well. I know it's just windows, it can act as a winter garden, but I think that exterior experience would be nice to have. So, but it's a great project.
Commissioner Alper.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just sort of wondering about the concept of lot coverage, and if you could speak to that a little bit more about, why 70%? Is it about stormwater runoff? Is it about green space? Is it about snow storage?
It's about one, not just paving their entire lot and putting, parking or loading spaces wherever they could fit them in. And this applies to R4 through R6, so the higher density multifamily districts. It's just, I think we picked 70%. I don't have a good number of why that number, but if you think about typical Minneapolis development patterns, you have residential structures up front, and then you have garages in the back. When you get into the multifamily, a lot do adhere to that typical, that type of platting or that type of development. Now we've moved into enclosed parking or underground parking within buildings. And so I think we're losing that backyard, if you will. And that's probably where, in this case, the 15 or the 10%, excuse me, like comes from, is kind of removing that space between what could have been a garage or not. But so that's how we came up with the number.
Yeah, thanks. It's just something I've been pondering here as we've seen quite a few of these apartment building projects come through, and how it, plays in with green space and water management, and even thinking about this winter and where all the snow goes. Are we thinking that through? And so anyway, that's where my question came from.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions right now. So I'll open the public hearing, and if the applicant would like to come and speak on the project, you can do so now.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Tim Baylor. I live at 2305 River Point Circle, in Minneapolis, in the neighborhood, actually. Just to touch on a couple of the comments that came up, immediately to the south of this building is a duplex, not a single-family home, it's a duplex. And south of that is an office. It's the office of Insight News. So it's kind of a commercial use in a residential area. And just south of that, on the next corner to the south, is a supportive housing project that's affiliated with the local church. When we took this project on, we realized that we needed to have some scale. So it wasn't just one building, we had to have a village. And so that included market quality and market rate housing. By the way, in 20 years, there's been no market rate housing been in this area. It's all been affordable housing. So we wanted to put the village concept together to comprise market rate, market quality housing, housing for senior citizens like myself who want to stay in the neighborhood, or maybe even move to their neighborhood but don't have housing options. Then on Broadway, we have 26 loft units for single residents or artists or whatever. The first phase that we are under construction now is commercial, and just to the north of us, where the second phase will be, is also commercial. We had an option to rezone this to commercial, but we wanted to one of the reasons we did not do that was we wanted to maintain the context of the neighborhood. And so the building that's under construction now is 6 stories. We didn't really want to have another 6-story building there, so the building is 5 stories so that it can kind of blend better into the community. Did not anticipate the variance pushback from staff or the city, but that's one of the reasons. The other reason is that the city is finally supportive of the project, and so we've got TIF applications in, and the city wanted to do this phase and the smaller second phase together. We're going through the city processes. And so timing is an issue. So that's one of the reasons we chose this path as opposed to completely rezoning it. The other is that we're utilizing HUD on these 2 phases as we did the first phase, and that process is the process. And so I'm trying to coordinate all these processes to keep the project moving because of the timing and just the economies of getting the paperwork through the city and through HUD. And so that's kind of where we are right now. 25 years ago, I opened a business on Broadway, and we've been there for 25 years. My background is as a planning commissioner. 25 years ago, I was sitting where you are, and sidebar, one of the things that I used to always be amazed by is developers coming in and have support from staff, and they start talking, and they talk themselves right out of approval. So I'm going to try not to do that today, but I just want to give you some context as to how we got here. I'm also, I worked commercial, I was a real estate representative for the McDonald's Corporation for 10 years. I'm a CCIM designee, MAI appraisal designee. And so 25 years ago, I was wondering why nothing was happening in this area. Why not? Why? What was going on? And so about 15 or 16 years ago, and talking with Jackie Cherry Holmes and Mohammed Lawal from LSC Architects, I said, hey, this has to have some scale. Nobody's going to do anything. We have to do something. So we did come up with the grand 3-block. It wasn't that over the top, but it was the 3-block concept. And then what was in my mind was, okay, you go out Excelsior Boulevard in St. Louis Park, you see the 3 blocks, you see the Trader Joe's. We can do that here. Let's try that. The city says, you're nuts. You can't do that. Start with 1 block. So that's what we did. So we focused on this area to kind of get to where we are today. And so I understand the recent changes to the comp plan. I was a planning commissioner when we did the rezoning 30 years ago. So I understand the nuances that go within that. But we do need density. That is a mandate. We do need some quality housing in the area. And I think that all things being considered, I'd like to not override staff recommendations, but I would like to waive those variances so that we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not getting ahead of you, I promise.
Is it a question for the developer? Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Campbell.
By the way, if you need an expert's opinion, the architectural team is here, so if you need some more
Okay.
detail, we are trying to match this building with the other 2 buildings so that they kind of have some continuity.
Thank you.
So I have a question for you. As we look at this, I think I'll speak for myself here. I think this would be a great addition to the neighborhood. I think we are trying to see what we can do to get this through. I think the reality is that for us to override staff recommendation, we need to have legally binding findings that allow us to do so. And so I guess my question for you is, as you look at this property, do you believe that practical difficulties exist? Yeah. I mean, you're seeking a variance, 4 different variances that, yeah.
Yeah, if you can speak into the microphone, or if anyone on the team wants to try to answer the practical difficulties question.
Jim.
Well, the 2 options that I have, we can go back and, I guess 3 options. We can appeal if you don't agree with me. We can go back and apply for rezoning it, which we can do that, or we can modify the plan, which means I think we can go under the R5 designation. We can go up another story to 6 stories, which would eliminate the problems that we have now with variances and setbacks, but it's awful costly. And so when you look at the numbers, we're talking about building a quality, I don't want to use the term luxury, but comparable property to other properties around town, but basically I'm using affordable rents. And so closing that gap from a development standpoint has been a challenge, and there's been a lot of headwinds to do that, and we've been successful thus far, and I'd like to kind of stay along that track. We need the density, so we got 79 units, and we did as much as we could to do that. Can't afford to go up another story with the rents that we got, so that's the conundrum.
So, Charles, and one quick follow-up. So I think what I want to make clear here is that the challenge that we're faced with here is or at least that I'm personally faced with, which is that I would like to find a path forward for how we do this. But based on the questions of my fellow commissioners and the presentation from Hillary, I'm not sure that I see practical difficulties that would allow us to make findings unless people here are able to do that in order for us to override staff recommendation. Or did I say practical difficulty?
Yeah. Commissioner Ford?
Let me ask, I guess both the developer experts and ours here, what you've been telling us about is an economic problem of either you have to go up one more story and the additional cost of that, or you have to cut back on the size of the footprint of the building and lose units, causing you another problem. So I'm wondering, is an economic issue a practical difficulty?
Not for us. No?
Well, I'm actually asking the staff and the developer.
Economic considerations alone are not a practical difficulty.
I tried.
Well, the other, I'm not sure if it's a practical difficulty or not, but a part of my conundrum is that the city and HUD wants to do both of these phases at the same time. I mean, we already have approvals for the 26 unit on Broadway. That's a funding on Broadway, so we could theoretically do that, but the city wants it to come together. And so part of that is timing for me. So it's not economic, but it's timing. And so I'm not sure if that's a practical consideration, but that is something that I have to consider.
All right, Commissioner Campbell, were you done with your question?
Yep.
Okay. Commissioner Conley?
Thank you. You know, can you talk to me a little bit about, I think I heard going up, the rents are too high to go up. So can you talk to me a little bit more about that? Building up, you'd have to add another another story. Years ago, you wanted the scale, but not 2 6-story buildings, right? But talk to me a little bit about how this building in particular, it's, you mentioned that it's too costly, so a financial burden, but also that the rents are too high. So I'm assuming that all 79 units are market rate, with 62 for seniors. So I'm just, I want to put together the financial piece in my head and also try to figure out why the rents are too high to go up.
Maybe semantically, Commissioner Conley, I can describe it as maybe restricted and non-restricted. And so affordable are restricted rents, so we have 20% affordable in these units. Unrestricted are what we call market rate. Now, in other parts of the city, market rate is $2.40, $2.50 a square foot. In this particular market, that rent is $1.80 square foot, $1.85 a square foot. And so these market rates in this area are at 80% of the AMI, so they're really affordable. That's the conundrum. And so going up another floor gets that, moves that nexus from what we can try to raise to get this project done out of the realm of possibility.
Commissioner Meyer, did you have a question?
I have a proposal after the hearing is complete.
Okay, yeah, so we still have to finish the public hearing. So maybe we should, anyone else here who would like to speak on this item before we close the public hearing?
Good evening. My name is Mohammed Lawal. I'm at 4701 Humboldt Avenue South in Minneapolis. Tim Baylor, the developer's architect, and have been on this journey for 12 years with Tim Baylor to bring market rate, market quality housing and development to North Minneapolis, a part of our city that has been greatly underdeveloped or overdeveloped with affordable housing. And I think the Commissioner Baxley, and there's a part of practical difficulty, which I understand by law that you all need to meet as commissioners, and the conundrum of whether we should have, as Commissioner Miller said, perhaps looked at zoning the site commercial as opposed to the R5 for residential. And the practical difficulty, as Tim defines it, and as I understand it, is one of timing. And I look at the project that we have designed for Tim as one of reasonableness, and one should look at the 3 variances, or the 4, that are being requested, and ask yourself some of the questions that you are asking. What is the difference between 70% coverage and 79%? How did we get to 70%? That's something, so what is the difference? And then I think the major piece really is the setback that we're requesting on the north side of the site, which is the alley is 11 feet wide, should be inconsequential because it's for 16 feet and 3 feet from the setback for a notch that I believe everyone would agree improves the image of the building as one sees it from Broadway, the major public corridor. On the west side of the site, which is a 20-foot alley, we are asking for a setback variance of 3 feet for the 2 wings of the building, which are 58 feet wide, allowing the building to have a large
central courtyard for seniors at the second level, which is accessible to the units and creating a very wide green space, which in and of itself will not. So I think that one should be inconsequential and should be allowed. And then the final one is along Bryant Avenue. We are asking for a variance to the setback of 30 feet, which is based on the house that is to the south of ours. Currently, if you look at that condition, the face of the new building will be 17 feet from the curb. We are providing, there's a 6-foot sidewalk. We are providing more than required landscaping along Bryant, trees, and the like benches that will improve the public realm along Bryant. And so I understand the ideological law of practical difficulty. However, we have a project that is highly reasonable, and at 6 stories, we still won't get to 79 units based on the geometry of the site, the setback at 30 feet, the setback on all things. We will lose too many units in a senior project that there is none of the like in the neighborhood. We just won't get to 79 units. And we've gone through it over and over again. And sometimes in architecture, there are things that you just can't put together certain ways and they just don't work. I would request approval of the project in its current form.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this item? Okay. I'll close the public hearing. Commissioner Ford?
This is very frustrating and frankly annoying. Mr. Bailey, you have an experienced team with you who've been working in this area, and you have architects working in this area, and they understand the law. They understand the city policy, and all you're saying to us is we'd like to have it ignored. It's not consequential. It is consequential. It's city policy. And I don't know why your development team and your architects couldn't put together a plan that we could approve. We want to approve it, but what you've given us is no reason to turn down the staff of the Planning Commission here today. You've given us no reason at all other than you'd like to not do it this way.
Commissioner Meyer?
Thank you. I believe Commissioner Campbell spoke for probably all of us and the city more broadly in that we like this project, we want to see more of it. And I think it's worth saying a little bit more about why that is. And I know this has been before the Planning Commission several times, but it'll be new to some people. That this is senior housing. It's going to allow people to stay in the city. It's close to transit. It's close to the Cub grocery store. One of Northside's other grocery stores is closing, so Cub is one of the last ones. So it's one of the only places that seniors will be able to be and have access to groceries in walkable distance. So I definitely think we're all in agreement that we want to see projects like this move forward. And some other context about the variances, like I mentioned, for the lot coverage, in other parts of the city, you would have been allowed to build a lot more. You are exceeding the landscaping requirement, so you're providing more green space than is necessary. And for the setbacks as well, if you were in other parts of the city, you wouldn't be allowed to, you would be forced to build, close to the sidewalk. And I think that's the case for the property immediately north of you. Staff agrees that there is no injury to anyone. It's a vacant property to the south owned by the city, and you have taken steps with the massing to push it toward the north and away from the south. So with all that, I think we should look to some of the previous actions the Planning Commission has taken nearby. So in December, the Planning Commission approved quite substantial setback variances for 2309 Plymouth Avenue. North and 1254 Russell Avenue North. And I'm going to read what the staff recommended findings were for that. So for the first one, for the Plymouth Avenue one, it said, for the front and corner side, staff finds that practical difficulties exist that are unique to the parcel. The existing context along Plymouth Avenue shows both non-residential and multifamily structures, primarily facing Plymouth Avenue North with reduced setbacks. The applicant has staggered the front yard setback, matching the setback to the adjacent residential structure to the south at 35 feet from the front property line along Russell Avenue North. Then the building setback reduces to 3 feet from the property line, starting 25 feet from the shared property line to the south. The applicant is proposing a 1 foot setback along the corner side yard along Plymouth Avenue North. Staff finds that the existing context along Plymouth Avenue North is a unique circumstance to the subject property and a condition not created by the applicant. It seems to me that this is a similar situation in that we have differential setbacks for the other properties on this block, and it seems to me that is a practical difficulty for the situation. I see Hillary has stepped up. You have any response to that?
Chris, would you mind Commissioner Meyer, would you mind just repeating in the shortest form what your practical difficulty is?
So there are differential setbacks along this block. The property to the north does not have any setback, or a small one. I can't remember exactly what it is. And that is the unique context of the street, and I'm blanking on which street this is exactly.
Bryant.
Bryant. Yeah. So
I'm walking down the block now.
Okay.
So my suggestion is that this seems similar to the variances that were granted for Plymouth and Russell to me.
Okay. And that would then be the practical difficulty for every variance that staff has listed, which would then allow us to approve site plan review?
That was a question that I had, because you said this during your report, that it was only because of the
That is correct.
variances. So if we found this practical difficulty, then we wouldn't need to make any further adjustment to the site plan review. Is that correct?
That is correct. If you can find practical difficulty, and it can be the same practical difficulty, I think, for all four, because they are very much closely related, is that then you could overturn staff recommendation and approve the site plan review. Again, it met all of the standards except for that one wall on the south side that was over 25 feet and blank. And we recommended alternative compliance be granted because there's a transformer in front of it, and then there's additional landscaping to help screen that from the street.
So was that a motion?
I will make it into one. So I move approval of item 9, including items A, B, and C, consistent with staff recommendation, as well as D, E, F, and G, with the finding of a practical difficulty that that there are differential setbacks along Bryant Avenue, and the context along Bryant Avenue North is a unique circumstance to the subject property and a condition not created by the applicant. So that practical difficulty would apply to items D, E, F, and G, and then finally move to approve item H, site plan review.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All right, I'll say I will also be supporting this. This building makes a lot of sense right here, and I think Commissioner Meyer's practical difficulty Also makes sense. Yeah. I'm not seeing anyone else, so I guess I'll ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Alper,
Aye.
Commissioner Baxley,
Aye.
Commissioner Campbell,
Aye.
Commissioner Conley,
Aye.
Commissioner Ford,
Aye?
Commissioner Koski,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Chair Olson.
Aye.
That's 8 yeas.
All right, that motion passes. Good luck, you guys. And that was our last discussion item for the evening. We do have one small item before Commissioner Alper has to catch her bus. Yes. Okay, so having addressed all of our land use items, we'll move on to nominations for the Planning Commission offices of President, Vice President, and Secretary. Would anyone like to nominate themselves or someone else for the office of President? Okay, Commissioner Campbell?
I would like to nominate Chair Olson for another term as Planning Commission President.
Oh, thank you, guys. I accept. Is there any other nominations? Okay. Would anyone like to nominate themselves or someone else for the office of Vice President? Commissioner Alper?
Yes, I would like to nominate Commissioner Baxley for the office of Vice President. If
Second.
you would accept.
Second.
Second. You would accept? Excellent. Are there any other nominations? All right. And then lastly, would anyone like to nominate themselves or someone else for the office of Secretary?
I would like to nominate Commissioner Marwa in absentia for the role of Secretary.
I will second that. I don't know if the chair can second things. I already did. Okay. Okay. All right. So we have 3 nominations, and we will vote on those during our next meeting. Is that correct? Okay. So we have, let's see. Yeah, that will be on Tuesday, February 21st. Are there any announcements from staff?
The whole on Thursday, the code development team will be bringing forward the land use rezoning study for its second discussion. It is up on the web. Jason Wittenberg did send an email specifically to all of you, in addition to receiving the agendas from Rachel. So please do look into, come with questions. It's very helpful, and it's good to get questions asked and answered, or at least asked now, so we can look into or research or do whatnot. So that is Thursday, and then yes, our next meeting is on a Tuesday because of President's Day on Monday, and so please make sure that you have that on your calendar. It is Tuesday, the 21st at 4:30 here in Chambers.
Okay. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Alper?
Yes, I would like to request of staff, given the number of new people here or renewing people, I think it's a great time to revisit the basics. New year, a new commission. I'd really appreciate a follow-up. We had an overview at the beginning of at least Commissioner Campbell and my term, and I'd really appreciate, could we get a cheat sheet on practical difficulties if one exists? Could we get some of these things like the zoning classifications and their definitions? Just some basic things that we can have. I'll create a 3-ring binder and I'll bring it in faithfully, I promise.
Yes, I think a training would be unanimously.
Can I also recommend it to that point that maybe commissioners who have specific questions about things, submit them to the extent that staff can have a targeted training?
Great.
So maybe by Thursday, we could send you some topics we'd like to have covered, if that works, in advance of Committee of the Whole?
I don't know.
Not to
if-
have it on Thursday.
Oh, okay. I was like, I
No,
think
no, no, no.
Thursday's going to be a really long meeting. I don't think we're going to be up for training
Just to
afterwards.
give you topics that you can prepare for it by then.
A list of topics.
Like if I send you if we all send you our bullets by Thursday, that way you have the things we would like to cover.
At like another meeting?
Yes. Yep.
Yes, I'm gonna have to look at the calendar and just talk with the other managers to see if Kimberly had scheduled an retreat for the planning commission, if that was part of the adoption of your calendars or not.
We didn't schedule one, but we've been saying for 6 months that we want to have one.
Yes, and I would just like to add that I think some of this could be passed out as material or sent to us that we could have.
Okay.
I mean, it's wonderful to have electronic material, but I wouldn't mind having like the top 10 sheets of paper that are just like here that I can peruse, you know?
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily have to only, let's not wait till the retreat is what I'm saying. It can happen in the next 2 weeks, I think. I think it's totally doable, and I'm willing to place money on it that you have this information within, staff materials. It would be wonderful to have them shared with us.
How about everybody send me your top items, and maybe I will connect with Cherylson on how to get it back to you or present on or whatnot. Depending on the list, I don't know if I'm gonna have it all done in 2 weeks. I got a couple hats on right now. These aren't excuses. This is legitimate. Like I
You're
can't
doing
get
great.
through my emails until like 10 p.m. at night. So I will do my best though. So if you guys get me the list, I will also talk with Eric Nilsson, our city attorney, to find out about if there had been a retreat talked about. We can try to get it scheduled. I'm really sure that Kimberly wants to be there, but I know that's not until May. So let me talk to everyone. Let me talk with Meg and the other managers, and let's see what we can pull together for everyone as kind of like a mini retreat or something, or
Thank you.
just some handouts or something.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Okay.
Can you do even more work, please?
All right. If not, and without objection, I'll declare this meeting adjourned. Our next meeting is Tuesday, February 21st, and our next committee of the whole is this Thursday, the 9th.